Thank you, Kirsten. Good morning. Good to see all of you on this day. I wish these were open so I could see the snow. I love the snow. I don't have my glasses on, which is going to be a problem. I need to find those. There they are. Okay, so why do we mess up love? That's the question. I'm asking this, by the way, because Valentine's Day is just a week away, and I am not close to being prepared. Don't know what I'm going to do, don't know what I'm going to say, don't know anything as of yet, which means the chances of me getting it right are not great, in which case I'll mess up this very special day once again. But messing up Valentine's Day is one thing. Messing up love is quite another. Much worse, for starters, and much more frequently done. At least on Valentine's Day, we know we're supposed to do something to express our love. But the rest of the time, maybe, sometimes, and a lot of times not. And the question that keeps racing across my brain is why? Why are we so bad at love? And I'm not just talking about the romantic stuff, by the way, the gooey-eyed stuff that gets all the attention these days. I mean any kind of love, friend, family, neighbor, you name it. We mess it up all the time. And the question, again, is why? Of course, what you're thinking right now is what I thought the minute I asked this question. It's hard. Love is hard. Everybody knows that, stupid. Why are you even asking the question, brainless? Shut up, sit down, get back to work. But within a few minutes of drawing that rather obvious conclusion, I came across something that a friend of mine sent me via email not too long ago. It was one of those things that I never have time for and usually respond by just kind of quickly hitting the delete button. You know, you might say thank you and then hit delete. It's a great moment, hitting the delete button. So I started doing that, but then made the mistake of reading the first line. It said, and I quote, "What does love mean?" And it then went on to give some short quotes on the meaning of love by a bunch of kids aged 4 to 8. And this is what they said about love. These kids, remember. Rebecca, age 8. "When my grandmother got arthritis, she couldn't bend over and paint her toenails anymore. So my grandfather does it for her all the time, even when his hands got arthritis too. That's love." Billy, age 4. "When someone loves you, the way they say your name is different. You just know that your name is safe in their mouth." Carl, age 5. "Love is when a girl puts on perfume and a boy puts on shaving cologne and they go out and smell each other." Chrissy, age 6. "Love is when you go out to eat and give somebody most of your French fries without making them give you any of theirs." Emily, age 8. "Love is when you kiss all the time. Then when you get tired of kissing, you still want to be together and talk more. My mommy and daddy are like that. They look gross when they kiss." Bobby, age 7. "Love is what's in the room with you at Christmas if you stop opening presents and listen." Nika, age 6. "If you want to learn to love better, you should start with a friend who you hate." Noel, age 7. "Love is when you tell a guy you like his shirt and then he wears it every day." Mark, age 6. "Love is when mommy sees daddy on the toilet and she doesn't think it's gross." Okay, final one. A well-known author once talked about a contest he was asked to judge. The purpose of the contest was to find the most caring child. The winner was a 4-year-old child whose next-door neighbor was an elderly gentleman who had recently lost his wife. Upon seeing the man cry, the little boy went into the old gentleman's yard, climbed onto his lap, and just sat there. When his mother asked what he said to the neighbor, the little boy said, "Nothing. I just helped him cry." Pretty good, huh? And pretty insightful, actually. And what struck me about these crazy, funny little comments is that they weren't crazy at all. They were perceptive, many of them, filled with wisdom that we could all understand almost immediately. All of us, we, the educated, bright people of the world. Which means what? Well, it could mean that we're not as smart as we think we are, and that's certainly a possibility, especially when it comes to me. But I'm guessing it means something else, something a lot more troubling, actually. And that is that love isn't really all that hard to understand. We get it, at least to some extent, fairly early on. The problem isn't understanding it, it's doing it. We mess up love not because we're stupid, but because we're smart. Smart at doing that which we know isn't all that loving. Take Jesus, for example. Given the way people talk about his teaching, you'd think that he came to earth full of brand new, insightful things that nobody had ever thought of before. But while he did have a few zingers, for sure, I think it's pretty clear that Jesus didn't think of himself teaching anything particularly new, but particularly needed. His extended critique of the Pharisees, for example, was not in their literal knowledge of the law, but their regular abuse of its meaning, doing and saying all kinds of things that justified their non-loving behavior while conforming to the details of the law. So why didn't they get it, these very smart people? And why don't we get it so often as well, when children do, or can at least? Children of all ages. Maybe I got to thinking about this because of something that happened to me recently that I don't entirely understand. It was last Christmas, to be precise, and our whole family gathered here in New England. Not an easy thing to do, obviously, since half of us live in California and the rest are here in the Boston area. But we managed to pull it off. And it was something that I looked forward to the whole year, thinking of things that we could do, places we could go, and just any excuse to be together and enjoy one another's company again, which we did. But here's the thing. I forgot to build a fire in the fireplace on Christmas Eve. Just completely slipped my mind. And that's a huge mistake, since that's when we do our Christmas readings, drink a little hot cider, and cozy up for the evening after we finish our fondue. Getting the dishes put away, which is always my job, and I was doing a million other things that captured my attention, which I thought needed to be done. In other words, I did a million little dumb things that could have been done later or at any time, and totally forgot to do one of the most important things on Christmas Eve. And what struck me as I pondered this bit of stupidity is how much it's like the way we approach love generally. Day in and day out, we have these people around us whom we say we love. Sometimes it's family, sometimes friends, sometimes it's a roommate or neighbor, or someone you're sitting next to in class. Doesn't really matter. But these are folks you're not only called to love by Jesus, love your neighbor, but people you want to love because you like them. They're good folks, in other words. But instead of loving them as you should, building a fire so you can gather together and chat about the important things in life, you're busily doing other things. Things that could be done another time. Things that in the span of history are a poop and a whirlwind. Nothing, in other words. That's right, I just said poop in chapel. Sorry about that. But honestly, that's how I feel. It's ridiculous. Stupid. I mean, here I was with my family, the people I love more than any other people in the whole universe, and I'm ignoring them, doing some dumb little thing. How do you explain that anyway? How can we mess up love so easily, so often, so terribly? I mean, it's bad enough that we pass up our neighbor who needs our help, but we even pass up our family or best friends. How dumb can we get? Pretty dumb, that's for sure. I mean, think about the passage that was just read earlier this morning about Mary and Martha, of course. Here's a well-known story which we've all read a million times and with which we can all totally identify. We know that Martha is dumb and Mary is smart. In fact, it's hard to read the story and not feel a little contempt for Martha, right? She's not only ignoring Jesus, this amazing teacher who would become her redeemer, but she's also mad at Mary for not doing the same thing, for doing instead what everyone knows she should be doing. How disgusting is that? Until that is, you start putting together a chapel talk on love and realize that's exactly what you did at Christmas a few weeks ago. So what makes us more like Martha than Mary? Even when we have read this story and know deep in our brains that Mary took the better part. We know Mary is the role model, in other words. So why would we, even for a minute, copy Martha? If I stopped right now and asked you this question one-on-one, you'd all have an answer, by the way. Indeed, I'm guessing that you've had an answer floating around in your brain since the moment I asked the question. In fact, you've had two answers, most of you. And you're probably wondering why it's taken me so long to admit it. Look, Dr. Gaede, we're finite and we're fallen. Everybody knows that. Everybody except you, that is. So why are you so surprised that we mess up love? What else could we do given our humanity? Not to mention our sinfulness. Good point. In fact, it's exactly the answer that I would have come up with if I were in your shoes or your pews. I guess I shouldn't. It's what Dr. Carmer is thinking right now, right? And that's what the rest of you bright people are thinking as well. Why? Well, because it's right, in one sense. I mean, we do have a problem here. We've all got our own personalities, after all. Some of us are like Martha, for example. We're doers. We can't stop cleaning the room or baking the bread or studying for the next test or jogging around the pond or whatever. That's just us. And some of us are Marys. We love to sit down with others and just talk or listen or be in one another's presence. And this is a pretty good deal when the one visiting our home is Jesus and has something worth listening to. But sometimes even being a Mary is not so great, actually. When we have a test the next day, for example, or the one we're talking to is someone whose intentions are not quite so honorable, you might say, and we find ourselves in someone's presence at someone's place that we shouldn't be in. Won't give any examples here, but you know what I mean. And the point is, being a Martha or a Mary can get you in trouble, given the circumstances. That's just the way we are, the way we are. We're finite. And we're fallen. Sometimes we actually want to do the things we shouldn't. That's what's been happening since we were thrown out of the garden, remember. In fact, it happened in the garden. It's our nature, our disposition. We mess up love not only because we are stupid, but because we're intentionally stupid. We want to love badly if we think it's in our interest, or it's fun, or it's less risky, or it's just the easy thing to do. That's us on this earth, and we all know it. So, why should I be surprised? Why should anyone be surprised? Good question. And good response. And given that response, I would be tempted under normal conditions to just sit down and stop talking. Except for this. It's lame. Those excuses we're using to justify our behavior, they don't really make sense. Not really. They're true, that's for sure. We're finite, we are fallen, no question about that. And that definitely helps to describe what's going on in a general way with the human condition. As a theological description of our condition, which makes this possible, it's a good answer. Nevertheless, as a justification for why any one of us does what we do at any particular point in time, it doesn't work. Why? Because sometimes I do better. Sometimes I act like Mary, even though I'm a Martha. Sometimes I actually get out of the kitchen and build a fire on Christmas Eve and love on those whom God has given me to love. Sometimes even little children see it, notice it, do it. You see, here's the problem. I have it in me to love the way I should. I've done it. I've seen it. Which means the problem is not my ability. I am able, even in my finitude. I know what I should do, even in my fallenness. I can do it, in other words. The problem is I don't. Which means what? Well, it means I'm a whole lot more responsible than I think I am. And a whole lot more responsible for the mess I see around me almost every day. This summer, Judy and I had the privilege of taking a trip to Germany with some very good friends. It's something that we've been wanting to do for a while now. Partly that's because some of our ancestors came from there many years ago. But partly it's because Judy was an exchange student at Göttingen University after high school, and she's never had a chance to return since that time. Anyway, we finally managed to do it. In fact, we got to stay in the same home that she had lived in when she was a student there with the same family and explored not only that area around Göttingen, but also parts further south, including the Black Forest, Heidelberg, Nuremberg, and all through Bavaria. Honestly, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world that I've seen in my life. But one of the things that really struck me about Germany was not the scenery, but the history. And particularly the way Germany has responded in this season after World War II and after the division of the country into East and West Germany. In a word, it's remarkable. The economic recovery, for one thing, but even more importantly, the straightforward way they are now dealing with their own history during the Nazi era. That happened 7 decades ago, remember, and much has changed. And yet in Nuremberg, you will find a fully documented history of what happened there, both before and during the war. Memorials and testimonies are everywhere. And every child in Germany these days is brought to Nuremberg during their junior high school or high school years so that they can see what happened to their country and to the 6 million Jews who lost their lives as a result. It was extraordinary. And it reminded me again of something that I had started to forget. And that was just the amazing nature of what happened in Germany in those days. Recall that Germany, or that area that we now call Germany, was moving into the 20th century, one of the most advanced regions of the world. Economically, that was certainly true, but it was true as well in higher education. From Germany, we got some of the best of history, theology, philosophy, science. I could go on and on. Certainly that's true in my own discipline. My favorite sociologist of all time was a German. And yet, it was there, in this advanced, well-educated part of the world, that decisions were made that led to the rise of one of the most brutal dictators the world has ever known, and actions that decimated the lives of millions and millions of people all over the world. And the question is, how could such a thing happen in such a place at such a time? And I'm not talking here about the details of what took place. I know that, as probably do many of you. I'm talking about the decisions that wise people made that enabled it to happen. The best and the brightest, remember. How could it be? Well, the answer is it could be. And it isn't because those folks were different from us. It's because they're like us, all of us. of any culture, of every nation, who know so much and yet act so badly. We mess up love, to get back to our theme, and it has extraordinary consequences. It isn't just a matter of someone down the hall being a little hurt once in a while. It's a matter of life and death for us all, forever. So what do we do? That's the question. How do we love rightly in these days or any other? Well, I'm not sure. This is a big one, bigger than me, unfortunately. The one thing that's pretty obvious from looking at history and looking at myself is that it's not just a matter of reading another book or listening to another chapel talk, for that matter. Knowing our condition is part of the answer, to be sure, but doing something about it, that's the trick. I will tell you one thing, however. I have seen it done, and I've seen its effect. I saw it growing up in my family, that's for sure, and I saw it in my school years as well, among friends and those that shouldn't have been. And most certainly, I have seen it in my academic career, both here at Gordon and at Westmont. I've had multiple models over the years, in other words, for which I am grateful. But I've had one teacher in this regard that stands head and shoulders above the rest. And that is the person the Lord gave me for a wife. Judy, as you all know by now, I can't stop talking about her, of course, which gets me into tons of trouble. People think I've got a one-track mind for one thing, which I do, but it makes her pretty uncomfortable as well. Being in the limelight is not something she likes at all. But this morning, I've got no choice. Valentine's Day is just around the corner, for one thing. For me, that means Judy. Can't stop thinking about her this time of the year. But that's especially the case when it comes to this matter of loving well and not messing up love. Because Judy is the one person I've met in my life who doesn't mess up love. And not just most of the time, at all. She's the best lover I've ever seen, period. Why? I'm not exactly sure. In fact, one of the interesting things about her is that in many ways, Judy's a Martha, not a Mary. She's a doer, in other words. And she always has a list of things to do a mile long, and she's always doing them to the best of her ability. But here's the amazing thing about this particular Martha. Her list of projects never, ever gets in the way of her loving the people around her. Ask her kids. Ask her friends. Ask her co-workers here at Gordon over the years. Ask anyone who knows her. And they will tell you that on the one hand, she's always got tons of things to do, but on the other, she's always got time for you, whoever you are, whatever your reason for being there. Which means if Jesus came to our house for a visit, Judy wouldn't be in the kitchen. She would have sent me there instead. That's a joke. She would have prepared for the visit, to be sure, assuming she knew it was going to happen. But when Jesus came, she would be right there with him. She would listen, she would engage, she would ask questions, and she would pay attention to the answers. And best of all, she would learn and use what she learned to love even better, if that was possible, which I'm not sure it is. And why does she do this? Because that's what she does. That's who she is, or who she has become since she decided to follow Jesus many years ago. You see, in the end, she doesn't listen to Jesus because she's a Mary or a Martha. She listens because she wants to learn. And what she learns, she puts into practice almost all the time. All the time. You want to not mess up love? Stop. Whatever you're doing, stop it. Stop and listen and learn. And live according to that which you know is right. Listening isn't really listening unless you're learning. And learning isn't worth a hoot unless you're living what you learned. In Germany today, they have something called stepping stones. I don't know if you've ever heard of them before. I had not. Until this summer, that is, when we went there and had these stepping stones pointed out to us by someone who was walking with us through town. If you look at them carefully, you'll see that they have names on them, these stones. It's the names of people who lived there, whose home was there, who walked there every day for years and years until the Nazis took over, at which point a few escaped, but most were taken and put into concentration camps, never to return again. And as we walked along and looked at these stepping stones, the names on them, the fact of them, I was struck not only by what happened there, but also what a wonderful, unusual thing to do. We need stepping stones in our lives. That's what it comes down to, all of us. We need to not only learn about our own history, but remember it and see it daily and live differently as a result. Only then will we stop messing up love. Only then will we become the people we have been called to be by the one who calls us. And what does he say? Get out of the kitchen, Martha. Stop washing the dishes, Stan. Build a fire and sit down. Listen, learn, and love the way you were meant to love from day one. May it be so. May it be so.